Okay, so our next story is going to be like our usual check-in on climate change and the world being destroyed. But today is going to be a little bit different, and we're seeing how going to see how climate change affects everything outside of the environment. So right here it says, could the voting rights fight hinder climate and energy policies? Communities of color are more likely to support pollution controls, renewable energy, and other climate policies than white communities. We'll get into the story. The fight over state voting restrictions could have a significant but less obvious consequence for communities of color, the potential to thwart their ability to support clean energy and climate policies. Voting rights and environmental advocates worry that efforts in several states to pass new election laws, ranging from mandatory voter identification and limiting mail in ballots to distributing water and food to people standing in voting lines, could depress turnout among communities of color and other populations vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. As we read the other day, we have people in the Senate, Janelle, uh, going and fighting for our voter rights, getting arrested for voter rights. You know, this is a serious topic. And why do they want to quell voter rights? Because the voter rights mainly are focused on poor and minority communities. And when the poor and the minorities come out to vote, more people come out to vote, more progressive ideas get implemented. So we're working backwards from that. They're trying to stop. They're trying to stop any way they can of getting significant change, such as climate change. But why is climate change so important for populations, for minorities, and for populations in low economic environments? Uh, President Joe Biden last week delivered impassioned remarks defending voting rights, encouraging his supporters to vigorously challenge the 21st century Jim Crow assault, which was applauded by the League of uh, Conservation Voters. The new Jim Crow. Cornel West speaks about that very often. We're really happy that President Biden is elevating these issues, and with that speech, and not just outlining what the issues are, but also talking about what the solutions are. Um, Now, why do communities of color show greater support than white voters for energy and climate policies, such as climate focused infrastructure, nationwide renewable energy standards, energy efficiency programs, and regulatory action on carbon emissions? Why? Because why are they more likely to vote for environmental impact? Is because they live in neighborhoods that are affected by environmental impact. The Syria Club reported this. Often minorities live in areas that are more prone to destruction due to climate change. Governments have discriminated against minorities by making it difficult for them to live safely in their environment. They often live in poverty in parts of cities that are not well taken care of compared to other parts of the cities where wealthier people live. As an example, after Hurricane Katrina hit, there were major floods that followed New Orleans, Louisiana, received about 10 inches of rain before the hurricane even surged over the city, leaving 80% of the city underwater after it hit, according to in a briefing written by Rachel Bard of the Minority Groups International. She wrote, a Brookings Institution report on the disaster found that those areas hit hardest by the flood were disproportionately non-white. Overall, blacks and other minority residents made up 58% of those neighborhoods were flooded, though they encompassed just 45% of the metropolitan population. It is not a coincidence that non-white communities were hit the hardest by the hurricane, yet people fail to realize it's an issue, including the government. I lived down in New Orleans for a little while, and I can say for certain that there are some parts of the city, especially lower income neighborhoods, majority minority neighborhoods, that have not been fixed from Katrina, that are still dilapidated to this day. They don't care about them. They don't care about those people in that city. But that's just par for the course of almost any major city in the country. It's so funny how we can talk about trying to save the Afghanistan people or the Cuban people when there are parts of New Orleans, parts of Flint, Michigan that they struggle to survive on a basic level because they don't have access to clean water, to energy, affordable energy, to Wi-Fi, to any of these things. They just don't have access to it. And I'm glad they're finally starting to see the correlations. Now, another correlation between climate change, as a study from MSN um, being reported from the Hill, is that climate change is affecting our mental health. So this summer, as we know, it's seen record-breaking heat, unexpected wildfires, flooding, and unusual extreme weather events occurring around the globe. Those who have lost their homes or their loved ones are no doubt feeling sad, stressed, even traumatized. Others who have not been directly affected are also feeling anxious. It's a big time for stress and anxiety in our country. A lot of people have, I think a lot of people have PTSD from COVID, and they don't even realize it yet. I think this time in our country has caused a lot of mental health, and I think we should really discuss it more because it's a serious problem that people don't like to talk about. I have a lot of mental health issues. I find it hard sometimes to really get out what I'm trying to say. I feel very anxious. I feel very depressed a lot of times. It's hard for me to get up out of bed, but I make myself do it. I try. Some days are easier than others. We should speak up and we should talk about it. We should be there for each other. Continuing in this, amidst all the other impacts of climate change, the impact on mental health must also be recognized. Climate change affects mental health in multiple ways, including some that are indirect, but research is demonstrating three main direct impacts. First, to the extent that climate change is contributing to an increasing number of floods, storms, wildfires, it is contributing to the mental health consequences of such events. Although the majority of people show impressive resilience, there is a significant increase in levels of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and substance abuse among people who have experienced weather events. Such effects can linger for months or longer after the experience. As as it said, the PTSD being caused by these traumatic events, these extreme weather conditions where people are put in harsh situations or their family is put in harsh situations, and they may devolve. Their mental health may devolve, or they may go and find escapism through drug abuse. I'm also very experienced with that. Most people are probably not surprised to hear that extreme weather events threaten mental health, but another less obvious impact may affect even more people. A growing body of research shows that higher temperatures also put mental health at risk. Studies in countries around the world have shown a connection between heat and suicide, psychiatric hospitalizations, and the use of psychiatric services. Possible reasons that are being investigated include heat as a stressor, physiological effects on the nervous system, and disrupted sleep. I can say this: when I was out and about, and we were at an amusement park, and I got so hot, and then I got upset about a little thing, but I was so upset that it was hard for me to calm down. My blood pressure skyrocketed, and for the rest of the day, I was in extremely uncomfortable, extremely stressed out, and just in almost physical pain because of how stressed out I was. Uh, and a third root, less dramatic, but is becoming increasingly apparent, worry associated with the awareness of climate change. And it says, as we hear more and more about the impacts of climate change, it's hard to remain indifferent due to empathy for those affected, but also concerned about what the future may hold for all of us. Some young people are even questioning whether or not to have children. There's growing attention to the experience of those emotional impacts, which have been variously, with subtle differences in meaning, called climate anxiety, climate grief, or eco anxiety. So, these three big things. Um, I can say for certain, I never actually wanted kids. I'm glad I had them. But I never wanted children because of me knowing how the world was like. I just didn't want to bring. I was so afraid to bring a child into this world because of how hopeless it feels at times. But on the flip side of that, I feel like having kids has given me a lot more hope for the future because I believe now I actually have something worth fighting for. But that's beside the point. I completely understand all three of these all three of these stressors when it comes to climate change and just it. And this is something we need to talk about, it being bad for our mental health. And it's a dialogue that needs to be open where climate change isn't just affecting the world, it affects us personally. You know, the infrastructure, the um the problems with the infrastructure, the it goes hand in hand with the problems with the minorities, um and how every we're all it's all connected. The world and the people that inhabit it and the cities, everything is so connected. To prove that just a little bit more, worsening climate extremes and failing infrastructure are intertwined. Human lives and infrastructure are taking a beating, not just not just throughout the world. Last month, multiple parts of the U.S. Midwest were hit by extreme rains and floods, most notably Southeast Michigan and Detroit. And this time, the same thing again. Only 1 year ago, extreme rains also resulted in multiple dam failures and extreme flooding just to the north of this year's Detroit disasters. So Michigan is taking a beating. So climate change is behind the flooding, the forest fires, and it's been like this for a while. Superstorm Sandy in 2012, Hurricane Harvey. Now the giant. What does this have to do with infrastructure? When you see it, the subway is not being usable. The complete shutdown of the grid in Texas, where so many people lost their lives because of the combination of climate change and infrastructure. We're a lot more connected. We're a lot more connected than people think we are when it comes to the world that we live in and the environment that we've created, but also the environment that the earth gives us. And if we don't protect that, then we cannot we cannot survive.